What's up, Youthfull family? Gary here, back with the next story thought for you. So, as usual, we've got our Bible, our notes, our hat, everything we need. So we're going to cue the intro. Alright, Youthfull family. So, our thought for today is going to be a little bit different than the other ones we've done. We're going to kind of take a step back almost. And instead of talking about a specific necessarily topic, we're going to talk about the Bible as a whole. So I'm calling this one, It's Not Just a Chapter. It's not just a chapter. So what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is that really when we're talking about the Bible, because we hear about the Bible all the time, right? Every message, every sermon, people walk around quoting it. Like, we hear about it all the time, but I feel like a lot of us don't really know what the Bible means, what it's there for, what it's meant to do, why there's a Bible. And so what I wanted to talk about for a second is a little bit about the Bible itself, right? About this book itself. So the thought that's been going around in my head is that other books, right? I mean, other pieces of literature, other, historical accounts, other, things that we read, you never just take a chapter here, a section there, a paragraph here, right? You never just do that. Like, if you were to read The Lord of the Rings, which, fantastic book series, one of my favorites, but if you were to take, any one of those books and read just a single chapter out of it, or, pull out just one specific little piece, you'd be missing the broader picture of the entire series, right? You'd be missing out on so much, and a lot of it would be so confusing and wouldn't make sense. And so why, if with other books, we read the entirety of the book so that we understand the context around each of the parts, don't we do that for the Bible? Why do we just go on the Bible and just pick little bits and pieces, the things that we think are relevant to us, the things that sound relevant at the time, those sound bites that we like to hear because they make us feel good inside? Why do we do that instead of understanding the larger context of the Bible and what the Bible is for and why the Bible is the way it is? So that's what we're going to talk about just for a second. And it really comes down to, right, you can break the Bible into two pieces in general. There's, the Old Testament and the New Testament. And here's the thing. I asked some people, what is the Old Testament for? Why is it there? Because a lot of churches today focus a lot on the New Testament, which is really good, don't get me wrong. But when I asked a lot of younger people, what is the Old Testament for? The main answer I got back was, the Old Testament is to show us how not to live. And that's a part of it, right? Part of it is to show us how, without a relationship with God, we can't do it on our own. And that's why some of the, really awful things that happen in the Old Testament happen, is because people are, flawed beings that don't have that innate connection to God anymore. And so the Old Testament does show that. But I want to put it in context, that's not, in my mind, what the larger message of the Old Testament is. The larger message of the Old Testament isn't this message of, you're not good enough. Right? To me, the larger message of the Old Testament is showing how God isn't just an amazing God and is using the rules that he created, right? When he made the world and when he gave it to Adam, he had a set of laws that he set down. And when he set those laws down, when he gave people free will, now God, to an extent, has to follow the laws he created. He has to follow the rules he set. It's much like if you're playing a board game and, you set the game up. Once you start the game, there's rules that you follow, right? So the Old Testament, in a large sense, it's God following the rules of the system he created and maneuvering things so that he can bring Christ into the world. So the whole Old Testament, if you read through it, is this fantastic story of God weaving throughout history every piece of, prophecy here, and this action here, and calling the Israelites here, and this raising this person up. Every part of it adds up to showing not only why we need a Savior, but also following the rules of the system to allow a Savior to come into the world, to bring Jesus into the world. And that's where, to me, if we lose that context, if we lose that bigger picture, if we lose, sight of that for the Old Testament, it can get confusing really fast, right? And there are a lot of great stories. I love Samson as much as the next guy, or Joshua, or Elijah and Elisha, which, pro tip to always remember which one came first. Elijah, J comes before S in the Bible. Elijah came before Elijah came before Elisha. See, it's confusing. But it all weaves this storyline that if you're only reading bits and pieces, you're going to miss. And so then when we get to the New Testament, it's what's the New Testament for? Because if the Old Testament is showing us the story of how Jesus comes, and then Jesus is there for the first, the Gospels, great. But what about the rest of it? What does that mean? Why is it there? And so what I want to put forth for you to kind of think about is that the New Testament, it's continuing on the theme of the Old Testament. So the Old Testament is bringing Christ into the world by following the rules of the world. And so the New Testament is showing us how to live going forward, still following the rules of the world, but now with access to that connection to God that before was missing. So the New Testament is showing us the complete picture, whereas the Old Testament shows us the lack, but then also this thread of bringing Jesus into the world. And then the New Testament is Jesus is here, and here's how it changes you. Right? Here's how you don't have to live by those old standards anymore. Here's how you can move forward in victory, in peace, with blessing and favor. And to me, that's amazing. So to bring it back around, right? You wouldn't take any other book and just read one small section. So you wouldn't take any other book and read just the middle chapters. You wouldn't take any other book without looking at the context. So when you take the Bible, don't just take it as a collection of short stories. Don't just take it as a good chapter here and there. Take it as a whole, and take it as this beautiful picture that God is painting, this elaborate narrative that He's created, showing how throughout history, every step of the way, God is there. And then when Jesus comes, He is not just yay, game over. No, when Jesus comes, it's you just hit the DLC, you just got the new version, you just got the HD remaster of the game, and now you can live life to such a fuller extent than you could before. You can live with so much more blessing than you could before. So in your day, be thinking about the context of things. Be thinking about, Christianity as a whole, not just as these individual little bubbles that may appeal, but think of it as, how the whole picture fits together, how it all knits into one cohesive whole. So that's kind of the thought for the day. Just really talking about what is this book and why do we care? Because everything we believe is based off of this book. And if you don't understand the context of this book, you don't understand the context of what you're believing in. You don't understand the foundation you are standing on. So take some time to understand what you believe, what you're standing on, what you're living for. So with that, guys, we're going to say goodbye for today. We will see you in the next one. As always, thank you for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, do all that social stuff. If you want to see the next one right when it comes out. Otherwise, God bless you, and we'll see you soon.